for listening to Uncle Sam's Soccer Podcast, keeping you up to date with the latest in American soccer. And don't forget to subscribe.
What's up, soccer fans? No, it's not Steven Jodorand. It's Jake Watroba, producer of the show. Alongside of me, or rather in Dallas, is Arman Kafai. Arman, what is going on? Pleasure to be doing the show with you.
Yeah, it's a little change up. We fired Steven. He was asking for too much of the cut, so we got rid of him and got Jake instead. Really excited for the show. The show is awesome. Great. I really love what we talked about actually today. But Jake, I want to talk to you about your little package that you got a couple days ago.
Oh, that's right. My package from awaydaysfootball.com.
Yeah. If you haven't seen the video, listeners, you should go watch it on Twitter. It's actually pretty funny. Your reaction to getting a club that you have no idea existed 10 minutes before.
Zero clue who it was. And the funny, first of all, let's say go to awaydaysfootball.com. They just got a new shipment in of I believe they said Russian jerseys, Scottish jerseys, and Peruvian
Scotland
jerseys.
To Peru.
Scotland to Peru. Plus more. Yeah. So go to awaydaysfootball.com, get a mystery kit for $25, get an obscure Russian Premier League jersey or whatever. Enter the promo code Uncle Sam at checkout to receive 15% off your order. Again, awaydaysfootball.com. Get a mystery kit or a mystery pack. Maybe you want a mystery pack. Maybe you want a jacket thrown in. There are other things that Away Days Football sells too. Mystery pack. I thought about getting a mystery pack too. Away Days also sweatshirts, t-shirts, hats. They got that all too. So give Away Days Football, give them a look. Go buy something. They're a great company. It's good to support small business like Away Days Football. Use the promo code Uncle Sam, 15% off your purchase. But back to the video. My unveiling of the jersey I received from Away Days Football. Yeah, I had zero clue who the club was, and the thing is, I'm trying to read the badge upside down while I'm holding it up to my chest. I still don't know how to pronounce it. Navstead, is that? I think that's how you pronounce it.
Navstead, I don't know, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I opened it, had no clue who it was. The only thing I knew, because I saw on Away Days Twitter account, there was a picture somebody had received, a picture of somebody who had received that same kit, and I was like, I think this is at the time I said Dutch club, but it ended up being a Danish club. Doing a little bit more research after the video, yeah. So that is the kind of fun you get when you buy a mystery kit from Away Days.
Yeah, the listeners, you gotta watch that video. His reaction is priceless, and he's just like,
the element of surprise.
What is this?
It's like opening up a gift on Christmas. You have no clue what it is, and you know what?
No.
Unlike the presents that your aunt and uncle give you that you might see once a year, you'll actually enjoy this one.
No, and actually, listeners, you'll enjoy our episode 2. We brought y'all Matt Doyle and Sam Stejskal from MLSsoccer.com. We brought both them on to talk some CONCACAF Champions League, but predominantly the theme for this week's episode is all about the youth, all about the academies. We saw what the Red Bulls did against Portland, and it kind of got us thinking, what's the craze going on with the academies? What's the league going towards? And I think we had 2 great interviews, Jake. Yeah,
I really enjoyed these 2 interviews with, dare I say, MLSsoccer.com's two-headed monster that is Matt Doyle and Sam Stejskal. I think our listeners will enjoy it too. Very interesting discussion, most notably on the academies within MLS. A lot of good information there. Joining us today on Uncle Sam's Soccer Podcast is senior writer for MLSsoccer.com, Matthew Doyle. Matt, how are you doing?
I am hanging in there, guys. How about you?
We're doing all right. We're doing all right. We know you're on a bit of a time crunch here, so we'll jump right in. What do you make of MLS's recent success in the CONCACAF Champions League?
I feel like it was a long time coming, to be honest with you. We've seen at the start of the decade there was some success with RSL getting to the final, and then I think in 2013 it was both LA and Seattle got some semifinals, and it was sort of in fits and starts from there. It didn't really progress until what we've seen the last two seasons. I mean, last year we had two teams make the semifinals, and Dallas put a hell of a scare into Pachuca, who are the eventual champions. And now, we have. It's two firsts. New York were the first team to win in Mexico by multiple goals. They were the first team to win both legs of a tournament, or both legs of a series against a Liga MX opponent. And 5-1 is like there's no debating that one. The Red Bulls absolutely drubbed a pretty good team, a lot of teams.
Right.
So that's one. And then the other one is like Toronto FC. Like Tigres is the champs, man. This Tigres team is legendary. They've won the last three Aperturas, the last two, Campeón de Campeones. They've, made the finals of the last two CCLs. Like, this is as good as Liga MX gets. And not only did Toronto FC get the win, but they closed it out, barely, but they closed it out in Mexico. And no MLS team has ever done that before. So it's 1 year. It's not there's a sample size worry, like maybe next year it regresses or disappears entirely over the next 2 years. But Jesus, man, they kind of checked a lot of boxes over the last couple of weeks. And I think that it's easy to be cynical about soccer in the U.S., but I'm finding it tough to be cynical about this.
In terms of the Champions League, Matt, I mean, we all hear this discussion about closing the gap on Liga MX, and the addition of TAM and other mechanisms were implemented to hopefully make the league better. Do you think MLS is closing the gap on Liga MX in terms of talent and quality of play?
Yeah, for sure, and TAM is a big part of that. Now, did it need to be TAM? No. It could have been just cap space, and it could have been, retaining talent that was already here, or just finding guys from Latin America, predominantly Latin America,
right?
And fitting them under the salary cap. But a big part of it is using the academy system and making sure that the guys that we have that are natively talented, that they're getting the best training possible, and they're getting put into the first team. And we see that with guys like Jonathan Osorio and Tyler Adams and Sean Davis, and so kind of on down the list. And look, we all want MLS to be the best league it could possibly be. It's not going to get there if we shortchange our domestic players. If we don't do as good a job training our natively talented kids as Germany or Spain or Argentina or Brazil, then we're not going to get to be at the level of Germany or Spain or Argentina or Brazil. So seeing those guys make this sort of leap, Tyler Adams is probably man of the match on Tuesday night. That's huge. That's bigger. Having that happen is bigger than going out and getting the next Thierry Henry or even David Villa. And so we need more of it, and we need more teams. There are 23 markets. There'll soon be 28. We need every team to sort of see that and have that light bulb go off, eureka moment. and try to create their own Tyler Adams, their own, Jordan Morris, and their own Jonathan Osorios.
And Matthew, one last Champions League question here before we shift gears into the academies. You mentioned today on an article that was posted on MLSsoccer.com that the Red Bull only comes in cans. Why do you think Toronto is better suited to win the CONCACAF Champions League, given they're matched up against Club America in the semifinals versus the Red Bull?
I mean, if you look at it, like, to win the championship, it stands to reason that either team is going to have to play Club America. Club America are the clear favorites at this point. I think they're second in the Liga MX, and they won last year. They won the last 2 years, I think. 2 of the last 3 years, they've won the Champions League, and they have in terms of valuation, they probably have the richest team in North America. As for why I said Red Bull only comes in cans, because I'm a cynic and a little bit of a troll, and why would I not say that? That is funny. Anyone who knows the history of this franchise knows that they find a way to fall on their faces when the cup is on the line. They've won a couple of supporter shields, which I think is actually the best title to win in MLS. And they play great soccer. And over the last 10 years, I think they have top 3 or 4 record in the league. But when it comes to playoffs and cup, they find a way to screw it up pretty bad. So obviously, I think that Toronto has the best chance of. If Toronto gets past America. Which is totally possible, considering they just beat a better team than Club America, Liga MX current standings notwithstanding. Then they're going to be favored against whoever they play, whether it's the Red Bulls or whether it's Chivas. I'm not sure that's true of the Red Bulls against. In fact, I know it's not true for the Red Bulls against either America or Toronto FC.
Absolutely, Matt. And earlier, you did reference the academies, and in week 2, we saw Jesse Marsch put up basically an academy-esque lineup of a bunch of Red Bull 2 players, basically players that have been in the USL and academy system against the Timbers, and they smacked them 4-0. And we've seen the Red Bulls produce many talents in the academy. And as someone who's covering FC Dallas, who's watched FC Dallas, I had this question pop up in my mind, and do you think that the Red Bull Academy is on par, if not potentially better than the FC Dallas Academy that we always hear and talk about?
Yeah, it is. It's better. I think RSL is better. I think Toronto's better. I think pretty much at this point we're getting to the stage where any team that has a USL team in between the Academy and MLS is better than FC Dallas. Because it's you can't jump from the academy, unless you have a super gifted, just phenom of a player. You cannot jump from the academy level to MLS. You need that intermediate step, and I've written this since 2014. Teams that don't invest in that are going to be left behind, and Dallas has already been left behind. I will say this straight out: if Dallas had their own USL team, they would not have missed the playoffs last year. They would have had guys like Reggie, right back was a problem last year for Dallas. They never got Reggie Cannon on the field. If they had him playing at the USL level for half the season, they would have gotten him on the field for the second half of the season. Same thing, with central midfield. Once Kellen Acosta stopped performing, they would have been able to either have Brandon Servania or maybe, Ja'Cory Hayes starts getting professional minutes right out the gate once he's drafted. Dallas has been left behind. Their signings are reactive, not proactive. Only 3 of their, I think, 22 homegrown signings have made any kind of actual dent. And every time they trumpet one of those signings, it's kind of they're massaging the facts, man. Like they're not actually giving these kids the best chance to make it at the top level, and they're not giving themselves the best chance to win. I would take Red Bull setup 100 times out of 100 over FC Dallas. I would take RSLs. I would take Toronto FCs. I would maybe even take friggin' Kansas City's, Philadelphia. Like, go on down the list. It's beyond time for Dallas to stop being penny wise, pound foolish.
And Matt, in your opinion, does the addition of extra TAM this offseason actually make it harder for some of these young domestic academy players to get into a senior side in MLS? I think I saw a couple weeks ago some statistic about 50 some odd players out of the 60 international players signed last year were through TAM. Do you think that's one of the big issues in MLS? It's kind of affecting the domestic player.
So for sure it is. And look, I think it's something that the next CBA is going to have to address, and the players union is going to have to address that as well. And I'm not an expert on any of the above, but from the outside looking in, I would hope that more domestic players end up getting access to TAM, or that they just change the structure entirely, and like TAM just gets sort of like married into the salary cap, because right now, I mean, just look at the best, the highest paid defenders in the league. It's guys like Michael Fiani and Claude Dielna. Like those guys aren't. They're not very good. They're not. And whereas like Tim Parker is getting traded because he wants, $550,000 a year instead of $450. Like Tim Parker should have access to that. So, it's something that the union's going to have to address, and I hope they do, because I genuinely and generally think that domestic talent is underrated. And I mean, apropos of everything, Toronto FC gave more minutes to domestic talent than any team in the league last year, and the Red Bulls were top three. Like and we see where they are now. This is not rocket science. If you have good coaches and you believe in your investment and you have a good top to bottom system, then you can win with guys who were born and raised here, and the best teams in the league are doing that.
No, absolutely, Matt. One of those players that I feel like that are kind of struggling to get minutes is a player that you talk about a lot on Twitter, is Andrew Carleton and his situation in Atlanta. We see now that he's making the 18, but he's not getting that much burn even in blowout situations. And we're seeing Ezekiel Barco is going to come back at some point, and there's going to be limited spots available. I know it's kind of a little early in the season, maybe even more of a knee-jerk reaction, but do you think Carleton can reach his potential with Atlanta United given the current setup and what you've seen so far from the team?
I think he can, but it's I would be more confident of that if he played for like a Jesse Marsh or a Bob Bradley or a Greg Berhalter or a Greg Benny. Tata Martino, I think, is a really good coach, but he's never had the reputation of a guy who likes to take sort of like raw material and coach it up. He's a guy who likes to get players who are the finished product or close to the finished product and just plug them into the lineup. And Carlton's not that. I mean, he's super talented, but he's not a finished product. So I do think he's so talented that he'll push in and get playing time. And I do honestly, I think there's some pressure on Tata Martino, which is new, which is something that has not existed in MLS before. Like this fan base pressure, there's probably front office pressure, there's local media pressure, and it's a sign of the league's maturity that like there's this young phenom, and we want to see him play, and the coach is being sort of held accountable for that. So I think the kid will get there. I'm not wildly concerned about it, but I do think that the fact that we're having this conversation at all is indicative of sort of a cultural malaise when it comes to young players, and a lack of belief in either the young players or the system that trains them. And I think that speaks to a larger need to create a better pipeline, but also like more good coaches. We just need more good coaches at every level in the United States. So if either you guys have the time and the inclination, please get your A licenses and start coaching, U8, U12, U15s, because we need more of it.
I mean, I don't know if Jake's down, but I've been thinking about getting a couple of coaching licenses in the future.
I mean, honestly, you can start the process online, and it's not the easiest thing in the world, and it's not the, U.S. soccer is U.S. soccer, so of course they're not going to make it as accessible as it should be, but the future of U.S. soccer is in your hands, guys.
You're putting a lot of pressure on me right here, Matt. One final question for you, Matt. Outside of the names that we all already hear about, who's a homegrown that we should watch out for this season?
Oh, man, that's a good question. I really like Nick Lima in San Jose. I think he's got a lot of potential as a fullback, and he's very two-footed, so he could play either left back or right back. And I love that about him for the the very obvious reasons. I don't know if people are as turned on to Austin Trusty as they should be. He's a big, pretty agile, left-footed center back, and he's 19 years old. He started the first game for Philly as they pitched a shutout against New England. He was on the past couple of U20 teams with guys like Justin Glad and Cameron Carter-Vickers and Eric Palmer-Brown. Needs to clean up his distribution a little bit, needs to make his reads a little bit faster, but I'm a big fan of his. And then the other one, I don't know if Americans are as aware of Alphonso Davies as they should be. But he's 17 years old. He's starting for Vancouver. He's going to be sold for 8 figures. He's going to be sold for, he might be the record transfer for MLS when he's sold, which will happen next winter. He's being watched right now by Manchester United and a couple of other top-tier teams, and I expect that they are going to bid for him as soon as he turns 18 because he's spectacular.
All righty, Matt. Well, we appreciate the time tonight here. Before you go, anything you want to plug, go ahead. The floor is yours.
No, just follow me on Twitter. I'm Matt Doyle 76. And, sorry I was a little drunk when I came on tonight.
I think it made for good radio, so.
That's what I'm aiming for.
All righty. Well, we appreciate the time, Matt. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Matt.
Take care, guys.
Joining us right now is MLSsoccer.com's Sam Stejskal. Did I get the last name right?
You did. You nailed it.
Awesome. How are you doing today, Sam?
I'm doing well, guys. How about yourselves?
We're doing pretty good. Doing pretty good on this Thursday night. And Sam, I just want to talk to you about the academy system and whatnot, but I was reading your article that was posted today about the Red Bulls leading a charge the MLS and USL partnerships, and it's something that I know I've been thinking about when you see a team like the Red Bulls being able to put out a almost Red Bull 2 side with players from the USL team and their academy and have them just thump Portland 4-0. And how beneficial do you think a USL side is for an MLS side's success?
Well, I think it can be really beneficial if it's done right, and that's kind of a big if. The Red Bulls are far from the only MLS teams who have a USL team, but not all of them have had a lot of success. The Red Bulls have had the most. I think teams like Philadelphia are starting to kind of push guys through their USL team. Real Salt Lake has pushed a few guys through. So you have teams with varying degrees of success. Seattle's done it as well. But then you have other teams that have kind of struggled. And there's a bunch of reasons for that. But in terms of the importance, I think it's really important. You can kind of establish your club's identity down the line. You can kind of take advantage of, getting a bridge built for kids that are too good for the academy but not quite good enough for MLS yet. Continuing their development so that when the time comes that they are ready for MLS, they're able to jump in pretty seamlessly and make a contribution right away. And I think we've seen that with New York this season, both in MLS play and in the Champions League. There's a certain confidence that's born out of playing in USL and playing with the same sort of tactical system as the first team and understanding what you need to do and when you need to do it. And then, just kind of doing it at a slightly higher level in MLS as opposed to USL. I think that's really, really helped them. I think it's helped them integrate guys quickly. I think it's helped them take full advantage of their good academy. And I think it's a really important thing. You have teams like Dallas and the LA Galaxy who operate in really fertile youth talent regions. Dallas in particular has a really strong academy, but they haven't really been able to create that bridge to the first team, and the Red Bulls have. So I think that's an area where you can differentiate yourself in MLS. There's a lot of ways to be good in this league. One of them is to spend a lot of money. Another one is to kind of do it like this, where you have a strong identity and you're able to push youth players through the pipeline. So I think it's important for any team that wants to be as good as they can be.
You mentioned Philadelphia, and it's something I know, especially with the homegrown players that they've been playing. Do you think that their academy is kind of, especially with the relationship they have with the Bethlehem Steel, do you think their academy is on the rise in terms of... yeah, go ahead.
No, sorry. I was just going to say, I'm not totally sure just about their academy and how it relates. I know they've had some decent success in the past. I know they've had some average teams in the past. But in terms of, kind of the final product, I think you're starting to see it pay off a little bit. They do have an interesting setup. They have pretty strong infrastructure in Philadelphia. They have kind of a residential thing going on. If kids want to, they have their own high school. So, the kids can go to school, they can train, and it's kind of catered around to that. So it's an interesting setup that they have, and I think it's kind of conducive to producing good players. Obviously, there's a lot of people in that area, which kind of lends itself to a lot of good players potentially coming from there. And I think you're starting to see it pay off. We saw Anthony Fontana in their first game and their only game so far score a goal. He's not going to start if everyone's healthy once their new number 10, Boric Dochkal, I believe is how you pronounce it, gets involved and gets going. But they do have a guy along the back line in Austin Trusty, who, is a homegrown player. He played, I think, 25 games in USL last year, who probably is going to start a lot of games as a center back this season. So I think they're starting to see it pay off. It's not quite on the scale of the Red Bulls yet, who have, a bunch of starters that came through that system and a bunch of reserves that are currently coming through that system. But that's one, maybe in a few years, we could potentially see like an all homegrown backline for the Union with Austin Trusty and a couple of their off-season signings, Matt Real and Mark McKenzie, and I guess Keegan Rosenberry isn't technically homegrown, but he did spend time in their academy. So, I think that's one. Maybe it's a couple of years behind the Red Bulls, but they seem to be on the right track for sure.
And Sam, you kind of alluded to this in one of your previous answers here, but why does there appear to be such a heavy trend in clubs that don't really utilize their academies?
Utilize in terms of, get them to the first team?
Yeah, I think I saw...
Is that what yeah,
I saw like a Twitter post earlier this week. I'm not sure who posted it, but it seemed that there were quite a few clubs who showed very little minutes played by some of their academy products.
Yeah, well, there's a variety of reasons for that, obviously. You have some of the newer teams don't really have academy setups up and running all the way yet, right? New York City FC, out of nothing, They have a homegrown player on the roster, but that's one that they need to give some time. Same with, I think, to a lesser degree, Atlanta, probably to a greater degree, Minnesota. I think one part of it is just talent, and I think that's something that sometimes gets overlooked in these conversations about playing the kids and things like that. Sometimes the kids aren't good enough, and that's a different question, and there's a different problem of why aren't the kids good enough. But I don't think we should really necessarily hold it against first-team coaches to not play kids when they don't have the level of talent that they need to have. Now, when there are situations when the kids are talented, maybe slightly less than a veteran player, but maybe the ceiling's higher, then I think that's on an organization to try and move it along. In terms of more broadly speaking, why? I mean, I think it's why don't young players get chances in any league, in any sport across the world, right? I mean, they're not quite as good as the older guys in most cases, and coaches need to get results, otherwise their butts are on the line, right? So if you're going to have a team that plays young players, that needs to be an organizational commitment. That just can't be a coach trying to say, I want to develop young players. That has to be a club president and a GM and an owner saying, hey, let's play these young guys, and understanding that they're going to take some lumps along the way, and giving the coach that sort of leash to be able to have, a few losses here and there because young guys are out there making mistakes, and not having anyone get fired over that, right? So I think that's kind of the broader trend. And yeah, I mean, I don't know if that answers your question at all. I think part of the new money coming in, that raises the quality of the league. That makes it harder for anyone to get minutes. So I think that has something to do with it as well, but a variety of reasons. And I think those are probably two of the main ones.
You mentioned that the kids potentially not being good enough whenever, and that's something that has crossed my mind whenever I hear a player kids or something along those lines that, hey, maybe they're not good enough. And you said it's a different discussion in terms of why they're not good enough. So I'm just gonna ask you, why do you think they're not? Why do you think some of the kids are not good enough in terms of? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a ton of answers to that question, right? And to be fair, a lot of times we don't know if they're not good enough until they get a chance, right? So that's one thing that can be frustrating for people that are watching and wanting young players to play. If they're never given a chance, how do we really know? But in terms of why they're not good enough, I mean, that can be, just down to their individual qualities. That can be a broader discussion about how we develop American players in America and Canada. It can be a little bit of both of those things. I think for the most part, it's probably down to the individual himself. Certain players have higher ceilings than others. Certain players have better skills than others. Certain players have better work ethics than others and are able to grow. And certain players receive better coaching than others. So I think all of that goes into how good a player can be. And I think kind of all of that is in why they're not good enough. I also think, and I don't think this is happening as much anymore, but I also think in the past you saw teams sign homegrown players sort of for the sake of signing homegrown players, regardless of whether or not they were really ready. And in those days, we're talking like 5-6 years ago now, when this was like before anyone had a USL team, right? And before USL affiliates were really even a thing. So those guys, they didn't really have much of a chance, right? They weren't going to ever play in MLS games. They might get an Open Cup run out here or there. They might go on loan to an NASL club or USL club for a couple months. But they were never really going to develop, and it was just kind of to say, hey, we have these academies. Look, there's a homegrown kid. But I think it's, as with anything with American and Canadian soccer and MLS, everything starts to come a little bit better in time. And I think this is kind of one area where it's happening. I think we're seeing better homegrown kids. I think we've seen that to start this season. So I think that's positive. And I think we're going away from kind of that trend of, signing a homegrown to sign a homegrown.
And Sam, do you think that maybe MLS should implement a youth league or like a U19 league per se, such as, how they do things over in Europe?
I mean, obviously you have the U18 league, for the academy kids already, right? Starting anything like that, it costs a lot. It would cost a lot of money, right? I personally think it would kind of be a little bit redundant. You have the U18s, you have USL, and I think if you start like a U20 league or something like that, that kind of de-incentivizes teams further from investing in their own USL teams, which is, I think, probably a bad policy. You want to have teams like Dallas, for instance, who have, I think, signed 21 homegrowns and have had 3 make an impact and probably 4 coming with Reggie Cannon this year, and on the MLS level, any significant impact. You want them to have their own USL team. You don't need them to have a U20 team. You want them to have the USL team, and you want to have that be a U20 team with a mixture of other older guys, right? So I don't think the league should be in the business of creating kind of policies, at least at this point, to de-incentivize that. Now, if USL gets to a point, or if the league gets to a point where every team has a solid USL team going, and there are fewer and fewer opportunities for talented 19 and 20-year-olds, then yeah, maybe we have that discussion then. But I think at this point, it's probably a premature thing.
When you talk about the implementing the youth leagues and that, I mean, so obviously you're against that, but would you be for if the league potentially implemented, obviously down the road, some kind of rule that maybe is like a mandate for clubs to have maybe a certain amount of academy players under 18, or kind of like what the Liga MX did with, I think it was like a 23 rule, like they required to play some minutes?
I've gone back and forth on this a lot over the last few months, and I know it's something that the league has talked about, at least at a preliminary level, in the past. On the one hand, it forces coaches to kind of give those guys a chance, right? Which is good, because some teams, they don't really do that. On the other hand, I think it's a little bit of a disincentive almost, right? Because if an academy kid is guaranteed a spot, right, is he going to work as hard as he needs to in training, knowing that he's going to be in the 18, knowing that he's going to get minutes? Is it going to create a situation where you start a 20-year-old who may not be good enough and he gets pulled after 10 minutes in a game, and then you're just kind of burning a sub just because of an arbitrary rule? So I think there's arguments for, I think there's arguments against. I think it's a really tricky issue. Personally, the way I think the league is starting to go, where you're having teams like Philadelphia, you're having teams like New York, you're having teams like Salt Lake, potentially you're going to start to have teams like Dallas really play their young guys. And then you have kind of the other end of the spectrum, where you have teams like Toronto and New York City FC and Atlanta, who are spending a ton of money to bring in big name stars, or even not big name stars, but young stars from South America. I think, if as long as you kind of have a diverse mix there, I think you're going to be okay. And I don't think you're going to have to mandate things. I think it's one of those things where the kind of the market will almost solve it itself, where, you'll start to see maybe young players gravitate towards the clubs where they think they'll have a better chance of playing. So if you're a youngster in New York, right, you might look at Red Bulls first as opposed to looking at City. And that's because of the actions of those two clubs, right? So I don't – this is a long way of saying I don't really know. I could see an argument for, I can see an argument against. I think the way things are going now is positive, and I think if they continue to kind of go this way, where you have a certain set of teams that are good about playing young players and really committed to it, then you don't need to do something like that.
Sam, does it seem to you that MLS is kind of at a crossroads right now when it comes to developing domestic talent versus bringing in international talent to boost up the league? Do you feel that MLS maybe has an obligation to develop young American and Canadian players?
I don't think there's necessarily an obligation kind of on the league level and the global level. I think it's a good thing for clubs to do. I think it's good business for clubs to do that sort of thing. If you can develop an academy player and then sell him for $6 million, or whatever, or $5 million, like New York did with Matt Miazga a couple of years ago, that's good business for a team. That makes sense. There's financial incentives to do that. So I think it's a good thing for clubs to do. I don't think they should be obligated to do it. MLS is in the business of putting a compelling product out on the field, right? And attracting fans and making money. That's what these teams are here to do. And I think kind of the more freedom they have in how they want to go achieve that, I think is kind of the better. I think that's how you kind of create distinct clubs, distinct cultures. And I think that's a good thing for the league. And I think we're starting to see that. And that kind of goes back to what I was saying in my last answer. So, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting, right? Like, I think from U.S. soccer standpoint, I think from Canada soccer standpoint, yeah, like you definitely want that. And I think if we ever do see a mandate, in terms of, a quota of minutes for young players or for U20s or U22s or whatever the designation may be, I think the driving force behind it would be from the national federations, because the tricky part is for the national teams, right? It's not for MLS. MLS doesn't have any obligation to make sure the U.S. national team or Canadian national team is good.
Right.
That's on the federations themselves. MLS has the obligation to put the most entertaining and best product in the seats and or on the field rather. And
in the seats,
in the seats. They probably want the best product in the seats too, right? They want engaged, entertaining fans too. Who doesn't like that? But yeah, so I mean, I don't think they're obligated to do it, but I do think it's good business to do it. So I think it's kind of a situation where you'll start to see it, and they'll start to do a better and better job at it as they've done over the years. Is it going as fast as we would like? No. Is it anything in our world of soccer ever going as fast as we would like? Probably not. But I think it's getting there slowly but surely.
It's true. I mean, I think we are slowly getting there. I mean, what we saw from the Red Bulls, I think, was really impressive, and I think it was a real, big statement that, hey, if you invest, you'll be fine. Sam, final question for you. Outside of the names that we have been hearing, on the Twitter waves or the mainstream homegrown players, who are a couple of the homegrown players that aren't mainstream that we should watch for the upcoming season or for the season that's going on? Yeah,
well, I mean, he's pretty mainstream, so this isn't too off the beaten path. But one I'm watching particularly this week is Danny Acosta. He's been benched the first 2 games. They've talked about kind of him having some attitude issues. So, it's an important part of the season for him. DeMar Phillips had a bad game against LAFC. He wasn't the only one on the RSL defense to have a bad game. So if Acosta doesn't play again this weekend, then, that's going to be a serious eyebrow raiser. In terms of other guys, I would love to see Jonathan Lewis get more of a shot with NYCFC. Again, not super under the radar there. And then, other guys, Anthony Fontana, Austin Trusty. I think Austin Trusty is really one to watch because he's going to get a ton of minutes this year. And, he's not as talked about as a guy like Andrew Carlton or even a Chris Goslin in Atlanta. But definitely one to watch because he'll probably play the most of any of those young kids. So I think he's one to watch. And then one down in Dallas, too. Obviously, Reggie Cannon we talked about earlier. But I'm intrigued to see what Paxton Pomykal can do this year.
Absolutely.
I know they like him. Obviously, he had a pretty serious injury last year, so we'll see how he's able to come back from that. But Dallas could certainly use another player who can kind of connect things in the middle of the attack. So we'll see if he can kind of grow into that role behind Mauro Diaz. But that's one I'll have my eye on for sure.
Well, Sam, we can't thank you enough for the time this evening. Where can we find your work? Where can we find you on Twitter and anything else you may want to plug?
So most of my work is on MLSsoccer.com. I'm sure everyone knows how to find that. And then I'm on Twitter at Sam Stejskal. That's Stejskal for those of you that don't know how to spell that. And I don't know why you would. So, but yeah, thanks for having me on, guys.
All right. Thank you, Sam. Welcome back, listeners, to Uncle Sam's Soccer Podcast. Great interviews there with Matt Doyle and Sam Stejskal. Again, we cannot thank them enough for their time on today's show. Armand, give me your thoughts on the academies here in MLS. Most notably, do you think MLS is at a crossroads right now with player development versus bringing in international talent to kind of bolster the league?
Absolutely. I mean, I really do think that there is a crossroads source, and you're seeing it almost in Atlanta. You're seeing it transpire in front of our eyes. They're bringing in plenty of quality talent, but they also have a pretty good, I guess, quote-unquote academy, because, I mean, it's not really their academy. It's players they brought in, but it's still technically their academy, and you're seeing they're kind of like, should I play Carlton? Should I not? Should I play someone else? You see that in Dallas, too, where the academy that everyone was talking about for years, now it's kind of like stagnated and slowed down. I do think their MLS is at a crossroads. I don't know what they can do about it, though. I think it's the natural progression of a league. I think the league is trying to grow too fast, is maybe the right word, or at a weird growth rate to where they're now at this real issue. But I mean, this issue exists in most leagues, I would say. I don't know how MLS can combat it, though, because it's not MLS's obligation, in my eyes, like Sam said, to produce teams that are good for the men's national team, Canadian, whatever. It should be their job to produce the best players that produce the best entertainment on the field. So I think that's the crossroad is at, Jake. I'm not sure what they can do to really do it to do anything except for potentially a mandate that requires maybe like a certain amount of minutes played by homegrowns. But then again, you go back and forth, and Sam brought up a good point of, do you kind of, disincentivize the homegrowns to work harder? It's a really tough predicament they're in, but I think we're just going to end up seeing teams that really just emphasize on youth and teams that really spend. And I think that's what you see, especially in the league, like a Premier League. And it's going to be interesting to see, man. I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, I guess the only problem I have with kind of going back, to the beginning of your answer there, or your thought, was, talking about it's not MLS's job to produce talent for U.S. soccer. I guess the only part of that where I take issue with is with how close MLS and U.S. soccer operate. I think we would both agree they kind of work hand in hand, maybe a little too closely. Especially I think some of these, U.S. soccer conspiracy theorists might even say that MLS is really the hand that is controlling U.S. soccer. I think that with how closely they work together, I think that MLS does have some sort of obligation to churn out, especially young American players. I don't know how closely MLS works with the Canadian Federation, but, based on how closely they work with the U.S. soccer, I think that they do have some sort of obligation. And I do think that you mentioned in the Sam Stejskal interview about Liga MX having that U23 rule. I do think that would benefit U.S. soccer, and I think that would benefit MLS too. The part of the problem I have with not playing young domestic players is there's no pro rel. So what does it hurt? What does it hurt to play some of these young players? See what you have. You're not going to get relegated. Why not? Why not give some of these kids a chance and just see what you have?
That's a excuse me, a really fair. Sorry, it's a really fair point.
Don't die on me.
When you yeah, I'm not dying. I'm not dying. It's a really fair point when you bring up that U23, because I mean, I do agree that it can bring a lot of positives, especially kind of pushing a kid into the exposure, making sure the academies are on point, that they're focused on producing a player, because they need to produce at least one MLS caliber player, right? They can't really be messing around and they're kind of good, blah 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 blah. No, you need to produce one MLS caliber player that's gonna be a part of your 18. It's a really important thing. So I mean, it can help, but I do see the other side of it where it might disincentivize. I do think in the future, though, we will see a rule like this implemented. I think there'll be at some point where the influx of TAM will kind of hinder the domestic American players' development, and basically all you need to do is it'll hinder it a little bit, but in the end, the new rule, I think, will balance it out, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and one thing to add to kind of forcing teams to have homegrown talent in their 18-man squads is, with that added pressure of making sure you're at least having one homegrown player on your roster for the senior club. Think of the ramifications of that. So now you have pressure to churn talent out, right? So you're going to need better coaching. And now that you're producing homegrown talent, now you can expose them to the top flight league, and maybe that 18-year-old kid excels in MLS, and all of a sudden now, hey, here comes Europe, here comes Europe knocking, or here comes Mexico knocking. They want to buy this kid, for a couple million bucks.
It kind of accelerates the process.
Yeah, almost. And I think that there needs to be a way to kind of force that onto clubs. And like Sam said, though, it's like what happened, how do you enforce it, though? Is a coach just subbing the guy on in the final 10 minutes, and he's just burning a sub, and he's just trying to follow a rule? Is that what it comes down to? I don't know, but I think that forcing young homegrown talent like that, just one kid, just forcing him to be played, exposing him to the top flight league, maybe getting the chance to sell him on, I think it just helps build the league up more, and shows the kids that you can use MLS to get to where you want to be, whether that's in Europe or wherever. And I think it also helps even bringing in kids from South America too, to say we can bring you in, we can make you better, we can get you to where you want to be, whether that's Italy, Germany, England, whatever. We can get you there.
Just a really random thought when you're talking about that. What role do you think the draft has? Do you think it hurts the academy process, or does it help? Because there are some drafted players that make a really big impact, and they kind of take away minutes from the academy. Now, it's a really interesting thing, because I'm a proponent that the draft, there has to be some sort of change within college soccer, because it's just not working. But the draft, I mean, look, you see a kid like Ja'Cory Hayes in FC Dallas getting valuable playing time and excelling in a role, but it just, to me, it almost seems like it's kind of hurting the academy.
That's a very interesting point you bring up, and I kind of wish we would have thought of that at the time we were interviewing Sam.
Yeah, I agree. I
agree with you on that. In theory, the kid you're drafting in the first round, with a top 10 pick, let's just say,
is almost like an academy player.
Right, and he's probably going to be better than the 17, 18-year-old kid in your academy system. So, yeah, I think that the draft does hurt the chance of an academy player seeing the field for his MLS club. And I think that, that's a very, very interesting layer to all this, too. Just because, there 9 times out of 10, that player coming out of college is going to be better than some kid in an academy system.
I agree. And that's something that's kind of been bothering me a little bit. I mean, the draft is a great tool. Don't get me wrong. I think it's a great tool to identify. It's always a great thing to have young players that you miss somewhere else and have a second chance at them. I think that's a really great part of it. But it's almost like it's almost like a homegrown signing in itself. When you pick a guy in the draft, you're not required to keep the guy, obviously. But look, if you're not going to play a first-round pick that you paid maybe $50,000 worth of GAM for, then why the hell would you do that? Like it to me, like, especially if you look at like certain some clubs, you're like, okay, for example, here's a perfect example. It just came to my mind. Montreal didn't draft anyone. You want to know why? They trade their picks because they believe the people in their academy are better than anyone that they would draft. That's a kind of conflict that I don't think people are really talking about, that it could lead to a potential of something happening to a draft or something happening to the academy system. I think right now it's not an issue, but I think it could turn into a big issue if college soccer especially gets better.
Yeah, something needs to be done with college soccer or the draft, like you said, and whether that's, I don't know if you cut up regions in the country and say you're entitled to these players in this region that are at these schools, or I shouldn't say the team's entitled to it, but a player can sign with these clubs in this region. I mean, I don't know, but I definitely agree that the draft takes away from the academy players, and I find that very interesting too, that Montreal would would think that your own academy talent is better than anybody coming out of the draft right now. With that being said, though, too, and Matt hit on this as well, TAM also is having a pretty big effect on these players getting playing time.
No, I agree. TAM plays a key role. But I think you expect those players to come in. You're expecting those players to take expect playing time. That's the whole point of it. It's gonna make it harder for them, yeah, sure. But they're always at the quality. These guys are really close in quality to that. Okay, for example, when you get a TAM player, you're not gonna play an academy player over a TAM player unless the TAM player just is playing awful, right? But when you have that draft in that academy, you basically you have two players almost similar that might give a leg up to the guy that was just drafted. Mm-hmm. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but that does take away from the academy. And maybe instead of academy products, we should look at maybe domestic players under the age of a certain number, and to keep those draft players within that. Because, I mean, it's tough, man. It's tough because some key contributors on teams are draftees. I mean, Jeff Cameron was drafted in the third round MLS draft. Fun fact that I learned while doing research on the draft, and it's something I want to dive more deep into in a future episode because I find that a really interesting dynamic between MLS draft and academy. Mm-hmm. I think if the academy is overwhelmingly better, you're going to have teams like Montreal who just skip. Then what's the point of the draft? The draft will go away.
Not to mention, I mean, I might sound stupid here, but I had to imagine that signing a kid out of your academy is probably cheaper than signing a kid out of college for coming out of the draft.
Yeah, probably. And it's just, you look at that, I think the MLS is almost entering crossroads with the draft and the academy. The draft is almost becoming obsolete with how good the academy players are becoming. And if Montreal is to set an example, who's to say FC Dallas would be like, yeah, we don't want to pick anybody because we'll just take the GAM and TAM because our academy is better. What happens to the draft? Draft is done. But if you strengthen college soccer, all of a sudden some academy kids are getting played. This is just such a dynamic you can't find in any other league because there's no draft in any other league.
Yeah.
There's no draft.
No.
So, I mean,
I agree.
It'll set up for something really interesting, I think, in the future, especially with the future of the draft.
Yeah, I think at some point, I think the draft will go away. It just has to. You can't tell teams to have academies and then also pick random players out of the college system either. It just, I don't know. It just seems weird, don't you think, that teams are developing their own players and then they're relying on the college system to also then develop players, and I don't know. I don't know. Twitter, you tell us what you think about this. Let us know what you think about the academy players, if they're being developed properly, or if MLS isn't utilizing their academies to the fullest extent. At Unc Sam Soccer Pod, let us know. Give us a shout. I think now's a good place to wrap up the show, Armand.
Yeah, it is. It was a great show, great discussion, Jake. And next week, I think Steven should be on, but
we make no promises. We make no promises. We might take over.
I mean, hey, we might take over with a brand new podcast. I don't know. Uncle Sam with Jake and Armand has a nice ring to it. But now Steven will probably be back next week.
We can call it Uncle Sam After Dark.
Uncle Sam After Dark. There you go. It's pretty dark outside right now. But listeners, remember, follow us at Unc Sam Soccer Pod. Follow me at Armand Kafai. Follow Jake at whatever his Twitter handle is. Follow Steven at Jake Witroba. Follow Steven at Steven Jodderin. And yeah, it was a great episode, and we hope to have you back listening next week.
Yeah, and before we go, again, don't forget to check out awaydaysfootball.com. Use the promo code Uncle Sam to receive 15% off your purchase. We'll talk to you guys next week.